Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Green Room. We're so glad you're joining us. Hey, we got a lot of resources that are online. We got the local loop coming out each week. We also got the Mausoleum musings, and we got a ton of stuff on our Facebook pages. Also, the app. If you've not downloaded the app, man, be sure you download the app. One of the things I said to someone earlier is you got the power of all our resources in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download our app. You can access all of this content on the app each week. But hopefully you guys are meeting with your group. You're having a great time and having discussions with your group. And this week we got Pastor Bryan with a Y and Zac on stage with us. So Zac, why don't you kind of kick us off this morning?
Zac Jones.
Sure. Well, Pastor Bryan, thank you so much for the message today on guilt, grief, and grudges. One thing that you said that kind of resonated with me was when you said, don't let your butt get you in a rut. And so in my profession, we talk about getting in a rut all the time and how difficult it is to get out. Why is it so difficult to get out of that rut in your opinion?
Yeah, you probably have a good perspective as well, being a fitness trainer and,
Right.
and superior shape like yourself. But, for me, I think, I think it, you think about digging a trench, and it takes a while to dig that trench. And so I think we dig these ruts in life personally and mentally, and it takes a while. And next thing we know, we wake up and we're, it's over our heads, and we're there. And then once you've done that for a while, when in my greatest struggles in my life, I stayed in that place for so long that it became the new me
Right.
and who I was. And again, same thing with physical fitness, right? People that you see are living that way for a long time, so it's hard to to see your way out. And then I think we come up with excuses, on why. Yeah, but this, but that, and I don't think. I don't minimize that because I think it's real. I think, when I felt that way, I'll never forget when we were in the financial crisis of '08, and we were losing everything. And I'll never forget, Heather looked at me and she said, God's going to get us out of this. And and this sounds so crazy now, right? But I looked at her, and I'll never forget this. And I said, there's nothing God can do, which today that seems crazy, and I know that not to be true, but I had all these buts in my mind, and of why he couldn't do anything, that we were too far gone, that I was too bad off, that I had made so many bad decisions, and I just, you keep playing the tape all the way through, and Rick Warren says, no one lies to you more than you, and you hear it in your own voice, and so I think we get in those ruts because we've been there. One, because we've been there for a while, for many of us. Two, that our butts seem real, like they become reality, and then we start believing that lie instead of the truth of God's scripture, like I did in that time. Like I really believed, like there's nothing I could do. God couldn't do anything, but if I had just taken the time to see what God has to say, and know, like I talked about today, that, he wants to restore me, and sitting in the chair today, like I can say he did restore me. He did restore our marriage. He restored our family and even us, financially, because we didn't know what we were going to do at the time. But so I just think, we've been living there for a while. We believe our own lies, and we have to allow, like I said today, Jesus to restore us. But you first got to realize where you're at, and get out of it. And sometimes we need people. Like I shared today, my counselor, Rob, and he was so instrumental. We always think, Jesus reached his hand out to Peter when Peter was, when he got out of the boat and Peter's, drowning, and he says, Lord, save me. And Jesus was right there to save him, right? And sometimes we think, well, I'm waiting for Jesus to save me. No, often Jesus will send you people in your life to help you. And he sent me Rob, which helped pull me out of my rut. And he called me out, and he said, hey, you're making some excuses for your butt, and got out of it. So I think that's why. I think because we've been there a while, and two, the voice is loud. We don't hear Jesus' voice when we get deep in the rut, and then sometimes we just don't know what to do next. I hope today's message helped people take some steps, to get out of that rut. So
Right.
I don't know if that answered it.
It does. Can I piggyback off of that?
Sure.
Please,
Yeah.
piggyback.
So is it because how much of today's society builds into that, where we want to so quickly justify or make the solution or correction by ourselves. Like we want instant gratification. So we get hit with a crisis and we're like, before we even go to God, who's waiting there to, maybe help us, we just go and exhaust every option that we can think of. And then by the time we're done exhausting those options, we're worn out and we forget to even throw it to God. I mean, does that have a lot to do with it, that we want things to be finished and so quickly remedied because of the society we live in now? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can tell you, it's why so many of us play the lottery, because we want we live in this dream that we think, hey, that would just make everything better, instead of like taking Financial Peace University like you and Meredith did and put the work in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a great struggle. Like it's why people change jobs so much. Right. I think, and oftentimes, because we want that instant gratification. I think we often think, in recovery, we talk about changing people, places, and things. And that's healthy, and we should do that. Sometimes from an unhealthy standpoint, we change people, places, and things to think that will change me.
Yeah, and it tends to follow you.
That's right. But yeah, I think for sure. I think that's definitely where we're at. Oftentimes.
Yeah, I hit on this last week, and you had me thinking about it with that question is, I actually remember a lady in our small group one time saying that there's a lot of things that I don't want to worry God with prayer and that sort of thing, because she goes, I feel like I'm growing in this area and I want to do it rather than just turning it over to God. And, how do you determine, or how do you decipher if it's, should this be something that I'm lifting up and praying for and just kind of release and let go? Or is it one of these seasons where God's really wanting me to kind of, okay, you can do it. You know what you should be doing. You go ahead and handle that.
Yeah.
But it's just...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll go back to Peter. I mean, Jesus wanted and needed Peter to step out of the boat to come toward him, to see that he could trust him and to build, his faith, I think. I mean, can you imagine if you were Peter and you stepped out of the boat and you're walking? I mean, I'm good at that point. I'm following Jesus with everything I got. But I think, I think there's certainly, I don't think, Jesus isn't an enabler, and he's not a people pleaser. He loves us. He cares for us. But we do. We have to remember sanctification's a technical word, but I call it the tag team match with Jesus, because our faith is all Jesus, right? He gives us faith to believe. That's all Him, right? That work is Him, the Holy Spirit. But me growing, which is sanctification, is growing to be like Jesus, is me doing it with Jesus. Like I said today, allowing Jesus to help carry my load. And so I think, he certainly, like he did with Peter, hey, you come to me so that you can trust me and grow in my faith, and I need you to take that step. I heard someone say, you'll never get wet if you don't get out of the boat, right? And I like to sit in the boat, and Jesus, you take care of all of it. Just calm the storm, Jesus, from there, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But then I think we have to counterbalance that, because what you said earlier is where a lot of people live, I think. In this job, you hear from people all the time, well, I don't want to bother Jesus with my cares. And we think it's like a noble thing and it's a humble thing. Like there's people that are starving. There's people that are way worse than me. And so why would I pray for that? And I think I would lead you to the Lord's Prayer, which is in second base, that you should take. And Jesus invites us to pray for our needs, right? It's not the number one thing, because that's what we'll do sometimes. We'll go right to that, You start with God and who He is and want to do His will, but then Jesus invites us to pray for our needs. And, you think about the other verse that He says, you have not because you ask not. Yeah. Sometimes my prayer is, Lord, I know you want me to grow through this. Will you help me stay faithful? Like, I'm afraid I'm going to be like Peter, who is good for a minute, but then I start drowning in this thing. And so sometimes that's your prayer, And
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because in Jesus' ministry, it was... It always amazed me, because His disciples was with Him, and He finally turns around and He goes, ask me anything. And out of all the things they could have asked Him, I mean, they could have asked Him about miracles and water and wine and walking on water. They said, teach us to pray like you. So something where they were looking at Him, the intimacy that Jesus' prayer and the relationship He had with the Father, that was the thing they asked Him. And it just always kind of stuck out to me. Out of all the things you could have asked Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
He was there when they were making the world. You asked about prayer, and I think it gives you a glimpse of what the relationship God wants to have with us.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. And I think to your point, it's like we shouldn't move past that.
Yeah.
Like, why, because I'm like, hey, seriously, like, how did you heal that person? You know what I mean? And it's, so I think we should. And I think what I've learned and been taught was that, when you look at that, they just noticed there was something, because these were Jewish men, they'd prayed, right? But they knew there was something different about when Jesus prayed. Like, big things happened, or he seemed to be at peace even during, like, times that they're trying to hurt him. And I think they were like, dude, like, we pray, but, like, none of that stuff happens, or we just are frantic, and so I think it's so important. And again, I think it just gives us this picture of, I said earlier, depending on how you've been brought up, it will affect your view of God. Like your environment, your experiences, they just do, and I wish they didn't, but they do. If your dad wasn't around, then you probably can lean to God. And I think it's just another opportunity where God gives us this glimpse of who he really is, that, like, I care about you. And, like, you can pray and you can actually, ask for something, and we need to get past this thing that we think God, is mad if we ask for stuff. Matter of fact, I think that's a good time to pause and, like, hey, during COVID-19, what is your prayer life looking like? Has it changed? Do you find yourself praying more, or maybe have you gotten to a place that I get sometimes where you're not praying as much because you're so worried so much? So maybe pause and just go around and ask your group, that question for a minute. Well, thanks for coming back.
That's always cool because, see, we want to hesitate because you got to find that pause button in the lower left-hand corner. That's awesome. Hey, I do have a question for you, and I'm so thankful for the resources we have here at the church, and you definitely hit on those today, both Solutions and Celebrate Recovery. Powerful, powerful resources that we have here at the church to be able to take advantage of. Man, I was so blessed to be able to see someone this morning in the thread on the comments of our service, didn't know about Solutions, and is going to give them a call this week.
Wow,
as a result
that's
of
great.
the message. Man,
Praise
that's
God.
the kind of stuff that's life-changing, and man, these are resources here at the church. So share that with your group and be sure that you guys are taking advantage of that, because these people want to help you, want to serve you guys here at the church. But you talked about Rob, and I'm so thankful that you talked about Rob this morning with unprocessed grief with you and Heather. And even last week, Pastor Bryan and his blog, we talked about with mental illness and that sort of thing. First of all, I'm so thankful for you guys, speaking pastors, that you're transparent and you communicate it in a way that none of us are above this.
Yeah.
And so, but when do you get to a point where you realize this is out of our control, and I do need to reach out and lean on someone?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Solutions or a Celebrate Recovery or a close friend, your inner circle, I like calling those folks, or it's a counselor or something. What does that look like? When did you guys get to that go, we're not figuring this out?
Well, after the third time, I woke up with a black eye from my wife that I said, we're probably not equipped to doing this now. But, I think, well, let me talk about how we figured it out, and then I'll talk more broader. But I think, we started going through this, and week after week, we just couldn't get past it. We were at each other a lot, and Heather more than me, and duly noted. I mean, she should have been. I mean, I made a disaster of our life. So she was hurt, and so it was hard. It was hard to communicate because of the pain that I had caused, and so we couldn't get on common ground, and we continued to argue, and to the point where it was like, man, like, what's going on here? And then we realized that we can't keep doing this. We cannot communicate. We need a referee to help us, and because it just wasn't good. And God led me to that because I knew that I owed it to my wife to make sure that we get help. And I had to do that, and I don't mean to get emotional, but I just I knew I needed to do that. I didn't know what it looked like, and I didn't know how it was going to work, but I knew that we needed help. And I had recovery before, so I knew the power of counseling, and I knew the power of doing step work and being in relationships and having a network. And I just reached out, and it started with Dr. Fred Antonelli is who it started with, because Rob's part of his group. And but it was we were going to Easton, and we were like, this is causing more stress for us to go to Easton. And Fred said, hey, why don't you go see Rob? But for us, it was when we couldn't get on the same page. And we were wise enough to know that we could not solve this on our own. And then, but what we do often, and what we did is we tried to sweep it under the rug. But it always kept coming back. That resentment kept coming back. The hurt kept revealing itself. So we knew that we had to get help. And so that's what we did. It was when we couldn't settle it. It was bigger than us, and the pain was too great. And I'd say the wrong thing, she'd say the wrong thing, and we needed a referee. And that came about pretty quickly. Like about 6 weeks after I got out of treatment, we knew that I was different, but we knew we needed help. And I think that's what people have to recognize. Is this, first of all, we're not counselors. I'm not a counselor. You're not a counselor. My wife's not a counselor. She didn't go to school for this, right? They don't teach you that in high school. We didn't take, how to be, talk well or communicate well. And I tell people in marriage counseling all the time, there's two things that are going to try to attack your marriage, and it's communication and finances. And people don't communicate well. So we need someone to help us with that. And I think if you've been trying it for too long and it's still, and you're ignoring it, or you continue to fight, man, God's got a better life for you than that. And that's when you want to reach out. And that's what I love. When I came here at Oak Ridge, I was like, this is great that we have these resources, these ministries, and it's volunteers that do this, and they're high capacity volunteers who are giving of their time. And to be able to point someone to solutions if you need one-on-one counseling, or point someone to Celebrate Recovery if you got hurts, habits, and hangups, dude, what a great resource. And if you're struggling with any of those things, you need to look them up, I think. So,
well, one of the coolest things is most of those folks that serve in those ministries, they've been right where you are right now.
Yeah.
I like what Pastor Bryan says. He tends to make a message out of your mess, and so they know where you're living right now, and they can help kind of navigate you through that. So very, very powerful.
Great resources that, man, we would love for you to take advantage of. Check it out. There's a tendency to think when you hear the word recovery that it's, substances or things. And that's what I love about Celebrate Recovery. It's hurts, habits, and hangups. And look, if you don't think you got them, you really need Celebrate Recovery because you're in denial. And so it will free you. Both of those ministries are designed to help free people from the things that they're hanging up with, those griefs, those grudges, and those guilts.
Yeah.
Can I ask just one more question, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
So that's all great, having the solutions and the ministry to go to and the counselor to go to. A lot of these we go through together as a couple, or if we're married, we have these problems that we have maybe together. So what do you do when you're ready to get counseling, but the partner who you're in this mess with is not ready to go to counseling?
That's a good question. So somebody realizes that they're struggling with grief, grudges, or guilt, but the other person isn't.
Right.
That happens a lot, really. So here's what I think, and I did this at times, and Heather did this at times. Heather went to counseling before I even got clean. Yeah. So I think, as a husband especially, but as a spouse, you lead the way. I think you go. And again, back to praying, you go and praying that God will change the other person's heart so that they'll maybe be willing to go. And hopefully, and I think you have to stay humble. I think you have to recognize that while it takes two to tango, and both people in a relationship probably have issues, if you focus on yourself knowing that, I had to focus on that I had a lot of issues, and so how could it not change the other person even if I go myself? So I would encourage anyone to go and lead the way. Right. And then usually what happens, not always, but usually what happens, they're like, wow, he's a different person, or wow, she's a different person. Maybe I should check this out. And that's usually how it happens. That doesn't, though. Sometimes I know people that go to counseling that want to work on themselves, but their spouse or their significant other or their, child that doesn't want to, and that's tough. And I think those are the moments that you just trust God and you continue to walk by faith, even in the midst of that. Did that answer the question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Got time for one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I think this holds up a lot of folks. I love what you said today, that grudges are something someone's done to us. Guilt is what we've done to others. Grudges, let's talk about that. There is stuff that people has done to folks that has been wrong, and that sort of thing. Help us understand. How do you know when you released a grudge? Do you forget it? I mean, because that could be totally wrong, what they did. Do you forget the pain? Do you forget those feelings? How do you know when you've completely released and you have that peace that, God wants us to experience?
Wow. That's a tough one, I think, because I think it looks different for everybody. I shared today that I've got, family members that were, really physically abused, and I don't know that they'll ever get past that completely because it was so horrific, So I try to be cautious in that because, again, it's like grief with when you lose a loved one. Like, there's no handbook that says by day 39, this is where I should be in my grudge, and so.
And you don't want to minimize it.
Well, no, you don't, so, but here's what I think. I think one, the first step is recognizing that you're holding a grudge. And like I said, this past week, I was holding one toward somebody that was important to me, and it was owning me, and it was, all I could think about was me, and how this affected me, and so I think the first thing is recognizing you're holding a grudge. You got to do that, because if you don't recognize it, you'll never process it. It'll go, you won't deal with it. It won't be addressed, and then once you do that, assess what really are you upset about. Because sometimes it feels way worse than what it really is. I mean, not if you've been, abused or molested, that is what it is, right? But sometimes with me, and that's what was happening with me this week, is I felt personally attacked by it, but that's really not where it was. My feelings were getting the best. So I had to assess, okay, let's just step back a minute, Lord. Is this really as bad as it feels to me? Answer that yes or no, and then get a plan on how you deal with it. And sometimes you can't go to that person, because it could be harmful to you, right? If someone's abused you, like, you're not going to go back to them and say, hey, just let's go meet together privately. And so I think you got to have someone to help you with that. And again, that's whether that's a spouse, a family member, and ask the Lord. Lord, what's my perspective on this? What should I do? Hey, we talk about making amends in recovery a lot, and sometimes the amends is with you. Sometimes you really can't tell someone that you forgive them because it would put you in harm's way. Sometimes they've passed away, the person that hurt you. But for me, when it stops owning me, like there was a defining moment this week. I knew that God told me that I needed to go to this person and I needed to tell them how I was feeling and I need to release it. And I did it, and man, it went away. Wow. And it was a release for me. And but that'll be different for everybody. I think for me the gauge is, am I obsessing about this? Have I set aside the obsessive compulsive behavior that holding a grudge can own? Am I calling them out on Facebook? Am I bad-mouthing them all the time? When I start seeing less and less of that, and I'm starting to see that I think God has healed my heart of that. And you need Jesus to help you with that. Like I said today, He wants to restore that. You need to let Jesus carry the load of that. Don't try to go through that process, by yourself. Let Jesus help you, and also if He's put anybody else in your life. And I think the bottom line is you'll start experiencing freedom. Because it won't be the thing that was top of mind. Every day I was thinking about this thing, and once I released it, it wasn't top of mind for me. Will it raise its ugly head up every once in a while? It probably will, if in an emotional moment. But I think when it doesn't own you anymore, I think that's when you know. Yeah. So I think and that's, as we close, I think that's something that maybe as a group that you could talk about. Hey, are you holding a grudge toward somebody? And don't elbow them right now, okay? But do you need to have a conversation, one with Jesus, and do you need to have a conversation with someone else, and do you need someone to help process that with you? That person could be in your group, or again, it could be in Solutions or in Celebrate Recovery. I would encourage you to take a moment and do that. And we thank you for your time, for watching, and we hope this has been helpful to you. God bless.